started getting more interested in spirituality, and through my interest in spirituality, also interest in how what I'm doing affects the rest of the world.
If everyone would just go away. Leave me alone.
Do you care to come? I said, leave me alone!
Reason to oppose the hands of tyranny? Never!
I will never send troops anywhere on a mission of that kind without telling them that if somebody shoots at them, they can darn well shoot back.
I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty! Oh, give me death!
A dark cloud is finally lifting across the world as U.S. military intelligence and their global partners are destroying the deep state criminal power structure that has ruled over our planet for hundreds of years.
We are free with the God-given right, and we shall not yield that right to any power on earth.
Hi, I'm Scott McKay. The world is at, and I am your host on The Tipping Point on Revolution Radio, where every Monday from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, we bring you the latest in this ensuing takedown of this global criminal empire.
That's an image of strength.
You'll get the raw, hard truth here on The Tipping Point. So come join us Mondays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern in Studio B at revolution.radio.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God... See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio of freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it.
Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio.
Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum. In the media, overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output. But very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time: cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the grand solar minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David Dubine, creator of the Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age 2015 to 2035 video series. And I do welcome you tonight. I'm here with Ransom Godwin, 420 TV, Freedomist Films as well. So with all the craziness in the world happening, what have you given thanks for today? What are you grateful for that you have at your fingertips, or something that you've enjoyed today, to give thanks for the abundance that we all enjoy right now? If you could reframe the day for a minute, because all we're being bombarded with is just end of days types of scenarios. But what are you giving thanks for? And I find myself asking the same today, because, you know, I surf through the news to try to find content for the videos I produce on Adapt 2030.
And through this whole nastiness of what's happening now, exacerbating the food shortages, energy will come first, food second. And I kind of stepped back from the feeling that I was getting in the news and just step back and get out to a tree out in a forest on my land and just sit there for a minute and just think about how grateful I was to have the trees surrounding me. How grateful I was that we're now working on the garden to get it filled with soil builder, throw out clover in a few different places under the raspberry bushes, and try to prune and trim all the fruit trees and get everything in order so when it comes to spring that everything can come to full production. And I'm glad I started a couple years ago to get all the stuff in place because I think it's needed now. So think about that. I went from zero to knowing what I know, got my farm, just went all out on stuff. And it still has taken me a couple of years to get it. You know, you could feed 10 to 12 people solidly if everybody worked together now this year. But I mean, to go zero to something, you got to learn these skills. What skills are you thankful that you have learned through your life, seen in videos that you know a little bit about so you can help others? I don't know, Ransom, I wanted to start it with a positive vibe because as you see around the world spinning, they're trying to put this fear that was like 10x over the COVID on top on purpose to get some agenda accomplished. And I don't like that feeling. That vibration is kind of an icky vibration. If I could describe it to anybody, I feel icky after looking at the news, and it's crazy. I don't know. It's a vibration in the delivery of the message. It's hard to explain, but it's very much like steps down from the COVID in terms of like denseness of the energy. I don't know. Ransom, I'll start it there, but thanks for joining tonight. Please think of one thing that you're grateful for today.
You know, I'm pretty grateful that I own my own land, whatever that's worth, and that I got family on it and I'm producing food here so that, you know, if things get weird, I think we'll be fine eating and whatnot here. I mean, I don't know how bad it's going to get. Trying to stay positive, and you're right. I haven't seen much positive in the news lately. I'm a news hound. I go through article after article after article after article from science to politics. I even, I'm so methodical about it that I even try to vet the article so that, at least I think I know what I know, which is almost impossible in this world now. And I've been realizing that things aren't quite as bad as the algorithm is pushing in your face. And let me tell you why. Over half, I'm going to say half of the videos and stories and pictures that I've gone through in the past week are hoaxes, fakes, or they're from some other time period that people are using to say that they're happening now. Now, I'm not saying bad stuff's not happening, but what I am saying is that there's propaganda from one end to the other right now. So much that countries are canceling each other's newses to fight over who gets to know what. So I'm kind of grateful for that because it tells me that things aren't as bad as they're trying to, sell me. And that means that they don't have as much control as they would like you to think that they do. But it is funny how we went so fast from pandemic to World War III. And it's right. It's just like there's some nerd in a think tank sitting around going, well, we can't use this one. We used it twice last year, and they're trying to come up with something new, which, they don't really have many tricks left in the trick bag. So kind of, I think if you don't actually live in a combat zone or area, you have the unique opportunity to get your act together and start gathering things that you wouldn't necessarily think was important or valuable, but realize the use of it if you didn't have it. Like today, I had one of those nice epiphanies. I used USAA Bank, and it was completely offline. You couldn't get information, you couldn't get your money, your cards didn't work if you had it from there, which probably means if you were pulled over on the side of the road, your insurance from their company didn't work either. You know what I mean? So it gave me like a little drill. What would I do if that was it and society just shut down and the banking is frozen and halted, like we've seen all over? And plus, the fact that they're using your money as a weapon against people politically. And I was very thankful that I have seeds, water, all of these other things, enough food to get by for some time if I really had to rough it. So I'm really thankful that, I prepared just a little bit. Now, it kind of gives everybody a wake-up call, though, that we have plenty of opportunity. That's what we all should be grateful for. If you're not literally in the combat zone.
Yeah, I'm incredibly grateful and thankful that I saw this cycle's coming in, and there's still a little more time to get ready, in terms of getting precious metals. And if you're going to try to sell me a new narrative, you're going to come way short. So I want some change ransom, but I want it paid in pre-1964 silver change. And everybody should understand bullion, pre-64 coins, what bullion is, squares, rounds, whatever, bars, numbered bars. They could come in 5 ounces, 10 ounces, 100 ounce, whatever, 1 kilo, pamp bars, whatever. You need to understand, because if you're going to be bartering and trading, you should know what it is, even if it has a little bit of that blue and gray tinge on it where the oxidation has occurred, that just gives it away. But I want my change in silver coinage, my friend. And by the way, looking up in Canada at the Royal Mint, they are so inundated with orders coming in that their website, they had to actually shut down. Too many people were coming in at the same time, and they put them on a waiting list in the computer wait list. 1,247 people deep were waiting to buy gold at the moment, but they were inundated so much that they can't. Who knows how that's going to play out? But the way I look at it, I'm like you said, it's a narrative. You're looking at a bottle of poison. Don't swallow the mass media at the moment. So SOT.net, if anybody knows this one, Sign of the Times, SOTT.net. And see, this is, if you're a news hound, you definitely want to go here because they have all these different types of news within it. So I've been delving into the secret history part and looking at where the grains were consumed first so I can map out this grand solar minimum. Wild grain consumption occurred in ancient Europe before the arrival of agriculture. Okay, so where were they sitting? Where is that place at that they had wild, natural, consumptive agriculture before we know 7,000, 8,000 years ago that we started to put it into row crops? And this is like 11,500 years prior, but that is directly after the Younger Dryas cometary impact on the ice sheet that sent, the amount of water vapor to the entire planet was a cloud for some, several hundred years that knocked civilization back. So when I'm looking at the news, I like to look at the more ancient history, historical news to see the cycles, because you see the cycle. The grand solar minimum was coming, and that was a stated fact. Even NASA now comes on the record and says we're going to have as little as 6 sunspots average in the next solar cycle, 26. We're right now in solar cycle 25. The run up into it isn't as intense. It's been a delayed onset into even starting this solar cycle 25. But the next one, everybody agrees that it's below minimal. We're going down to literally Maunder minimum in the 1640, 1650 type sunspot activity. So you would expect the same things if there's low solar activity. The magnetic field around the planet is behaving differently. Our jet streams and our cloud cells are going to move to different places because they're not locked in real strong like two magnets touching each other. So I like to look back in history and find things in the cycles that would say, well, this cycle, this place. I'm looking into the same areas here, and it's the exact same thing where the Denisovans were, if you can believe that. So what is it about where these areas of this unknown or barely known Denisovan species, culture, agriculture, whatever it is, why are there very few records? I mean, they had a very advanced society for probably 30,000 years during the height of the Ice Age. Where did they go? And the reason I bring it up is this grand solar minimum is a known fact that we are going into incredible low solar activity that is going to slash global agriculture on its own as a natural cycle. The sun decreasing in its output for multi-decades. You can't hide that from the people. Myth and legend coming off the canyon walls. Biblical scriptures coming where and Chinese and Japanese prophecy or telling of repeats of cycles in the sky coming back through the stars. Temple of the Fox, for example. But the global agriculture was going to be knocked down anyway. Now, the percentage was unknown. It was between 5 and 8% in the first couple of years when it got really heavy. And you really started to see the onset like we are now. I mean, Australia just got a year's worth of rain in what, 1 or 2 days. All right, these are the kind of events that are going to be now ever unfolding at a faster rate and a more intense rate because the magnetic field of our planet is being affected. Now, if that was a government, I was a government, I'd try to cover that up. And here we are with massive supply chain shortages. Oh, there's not enough fertilizer. Great. That was going to knock global agriculture down 12% anyway. Not enough fertilizer, supply chains aren't working. Oh, you can blame it all on fertilizer disruptions. And now we have this war with Ukraine and whatever. 30% of the global grains come out of there for export. So between the wheat and the corn, anything that's extra on the market that countries aren't eating or using in their own countries, you have that excess. You can send that to other countries. They'll buy it. Africa's major buyers of Russian and Ukrainian wheat. But that's not going to be there. They're not going to have any extra this year. So then what does that do? Oh, by the way, there's fertilizer shortages this year. Oh, and by the way, the grand solar minimum's knocking off crop production. Oops. So looking back in history, then what does that tell us? Well, governments know these cycles are here, and then how are you going to deal with it? Well, you're going to have to distract. It's going to be such a chaotic event. This thing is like a once in a 2,000-year event at best. 79 AD, best match. I mean, if you were government's Ransom, how would you handle it, man? You know, just exactly how I laid it out. We got these 3 overlapping sets, and 2 of them seem to be covering up the natural cycle. But that's the most important because you can't bring in the carbon taxes without that without the CO2 narrative, right? So you need to keep that in play. So you're going to need to double mask it, right? Oop, no pun intended. You're going to have to put layer 1 fertilizer shortages, herbicide shortages, and then if nobody believes that, it's going to have to be the war. All right. Oh, by the way, there was another fertilizer plant that burned down today, another 1.5 million tons off, and Russia not exporting potash or urea either. So what excuse is covering what excuse is my question, you know? They must know the cycle's here. And what, you know, how do you, I'm confused, you know, how many levels deep does it go and which event is covering which event? It should be my short question, but I like to stretch stuff out, Ransom.
Right. And we were staying positive. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, it seems like it's pretty easy for them to cover up what's going on right now. I mean, you know, here's an article from the Huffington Post. Could a small nuclear war reverse global warming? Oh, well, you know, if things are going to get cold and, you know, we have nuke plants going critical in the Ukraine, I wouldn't expect too much, you know, grain and stuff coming out of that region anymore. And then on top of that, you know, the whole area being, because Putin basically said he's going to take back the whole Ukraine. And everybody over here in the U.S. seems to be okay with pushing a nuclear war. And I think we talked about that before, but I think they're going to pull a fast one. Think about this, though. If this reactor that's now supposedly on fire and they're worried about it blowing up and going critical there, then that whole area is done producing food for a while. And, you know, this is exactly what the World Economic Forum is saying that they wanted for everybody, is to, you know, put them in a big reset. And here we go. I don't know. You could make everybody stifle their work and production for a couple of years, then add a, you know, a possible nuclear war and the stopping of people moving all through Eastern Europe now. And then the other night I played a live stream of the flight plans through there, and they're, you know, they're avoiding the Ukraine like a plague. I mean, there's very few planes going through this giant bubble in Eastern Europe. I'm sure you heard the news about, speaking of fertilizer, that Russia is going to stop selling their excess fertilizer to Eastern Europe and all of those countries right there. So that's funny. I saw that in the news, and I thought of you right away because you're always talking about the fertilizer. And then in the same story, they were talking about how China is now going to keep their fertilizer too. So and on cue, surprisingly though, India is siding with Russia. As you can see, they abstained at the UN, and so did China. That was expected. And China and Russia said they were buddies, and Putin, which is funny, has been talking about, releasing robot dogs, the same thing that they're talking about doing over here. And I just think it's just a big theatrical planned event, just like the last 2 years. They wanted to see how easily they could, manufacture stories and fear. And they have got it down to a precise science. People forget that there was all of this weird turnover of governments like in 2014. And if you're not familiar with that, you should, research that a little bit, and then you'll wonder what in the world is going on right now as far as the Western world siding with one side trying to provoke a nuclear war, because that's what they're doing. But I think they're going to pull a fast one, and we're going to see nuclear war happen. Again, like World War II in the Pacific, and it'll be in the South Pacific Sea when China is going to take this opportunity to take back Taiwan. I'm almost positive that's what's in the works for this spring and summer is another, they're going to take another spot, and the United States won't do anything unless we're planned to have a small nuclear exchange on some of these uninhabited man-made islands in the Pacific, which would stop all trade everywhere. So I don't know. These guys are crazy. They like that. Just listen to these people in the World Economic Forum. They're all ready for cyber attacks and power outages, just in time for the grand solar minimum. So I think they can completely cover that up until it doesn't matter. And the mass portion of the 7.5 to 8 billion people on the planet are not going to be prepared and are going to have some rough times.
Well, I'm grateful that we have seen what was coming to try to talk about this with others and ourselves and our families, people around us, communities, cities, towns, neighborhoods. We did have access to the information. I'm grateful for that now. But yeah, they are definitely trying to cut off the info flow, because cutting off something else, the way they're doing it with the sanctions doesn't really make sense, because 70% of all the imports of corn and wheat in the entire EU come from Russia and Ukraine. So I'm looking at this in a realistic sense going, wait a second, all these, they even cut off cats going to, there's dog shows, but they also have cat shows, feline shows. Yeah, and they even said you can't even bring your feline cat to the show because you're Russian. And there was some other, they were going to think of mulling it over to make all Russians leave the UK. There's just so much ridiculous going on right now. And it's overboard to the point of absurdity where, okay, yeah, football players, soccer players are not going to go play the match at FIFA. And, there's other things that are more culturally appropriate over there if you're not invited, right? But to not have anybody allowed bring their cat to a cat show because you're Russian, see, that was the last straw. That was the most ridiculousness I've ever seen. Of a news story, to see that in play, I was like, if you didn't see that was a fully planned thing. By this point, to create as much chaos and havoc and squeeze that point as tight as you can on the artery, then you're just not looking. You're not awake. You're not seeing it. It's like, it's so in your face now, you can't not see it. And then I looked at that and I said, they're forbidding people from going to the cat show. All right, so this thing's for real. Then who's the biggest importers? Well, why would the EU do it to itself? Because Germany's gas price today is 100% higher than it was last week when this thing first started. So imagine our gas price is doubling from $3.50 a gallon to $7 a gallon in a week. That's what happened in Germany because of this. And what do you think is going to happen with the food? Of course, they're not going to get their corn and the wheat. And Moldova just decided to suspend any exports of corn, wheat, and sugar in Moldova. All right, then we got Argentina saying the same thing. We're not going to export our grains. So, how many more countries can do this? And I just, for me, Ransom, I am going to ask a question like, why would they go to such lengths of even banning cat show participants because you're Russian to squeeze the economy so hard that it's going to lock off all the oil, it's going to lock off all the natural gas, it's going to lock off all the wheat, and it's going to lock down all the corn, 70% of all of that, I just said, into the EU, completely to zero. What are they doing? See, it makes no sense except it's a planned collapse and a planned chaotic disassemblance. Welcome to cryptocurrency. Welcome to your COVID pass. Welcome to your digital ration card. Happy 2022, baby.
Yes, David, we're going to use the food as a weapon. No, that's exactly what's going on. This is not an accident, like I've said before. This is the shatter belt. This is the classical World War area that it starts in. You remember we had the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, and then World War II when Ukraine took Germany's side over the Russians. And then, a lot of people forget that. And then recently in 2014, they had a because I don't want to get banned, but they were a pro-labor German party from the 30s. The group, and they have their little logos, and they're all about the supremacy idea. But yet George Soros helped them, cause a big chaotic thing. And if you remember, the former president of the Ukraine was dragged out by a mob there, and then they turned over to this new government. But it's not an accident. And I'm seeing stories like, all of these people virtue signaling by pouring out their supposed Russian vodka that was made in Western Europe by non-Russian companies. And then the idea that you would punish anybody by pouring out vodka that you already paid for. How's that going to hurt anybody anyway? You already paid for it. You're only hurting your own pocket.
And also throwing away valid medicine, because as we grow into this and supply chains get more constricted, things like rubbing alcohol are going to be less available. So think about that, having the alcohol as medicine as well as a tradable. They're getting you to throw away your like emergency stocks of medicine and tradables. Only the idiotic would fall for that, and we're seeing it.
Yeah, that's absolutely silly, isn't it? What are they going to start, dumping beets in the streets because people make borscht out of beets? The whole thing is obviously manufactured, and I have a feeling it has a lot to do with, the Biden family and the Biden family ties over the last couple of years. This has been an ongoing thing with the Biden-Obama group about they wanted to destabilize this area. And don't forget, back in the Clinton days, we were doing something similar to some of the other breakaways. This proxy war has actually never stopped. That's why a lot of, people refer to the Cold War as the Third World War, which would make this the Fourth World War, actually, if it starts into a hot conflict. And then you got to think about this. What is the end result of three superpowers fighting? And basically, that would be just who gets to run the one world government. And I don't know if you saw that woman they keep having all over Fox and CNN that's supposed to be this Ukrainian fighter, but she straight said on Fox that they're fighting for the New World Order. I don't know if she didn't know what she was talking about, but it's very doubtful. And then, I keep coming across these videos of people crying about this or that, and then they turn out to be these little Klaus Schwab, George Soros, Open Society people, or the World Economic Forum, leaders for a better tomorrow. So it's weird. It's like a James Bond movie script. It's like Hollywood has, like I said, it's a technological kind of attack on the mentality of the world's populace right now. And they have got it down to a precise science using basically Hollywood style production in a propaganda form. And it's really crazy to see how many people fall for these things so fast, because the amount of people right now, I would imagine if you went on Facebook or Twitter, siding with one side or another, is about the same amount of people that immediately went out and got a face covering when that trend and that fad started just a couple years ago.
Keep your dirty face covering off me. I don't want the bacteria in to breathe my own CO2 until I'm hypoxic. Thanks, but no thanks. So looking back in the origins of humanity, because see, this is where it all stems from. So I'm wondering if the same controllers of our planet are still in power and in play as they were from the 30,000-year-old Venus of Willendorf. And these are the statues, small figurines, 4.5 inches tall, I think. They were like found in 1908 at a Paleolithic site. This is in Austria. So again, you start to look at some of these older places where cradles of mountain ranges or cradles of regions were the civilization of that. So Austria, so you look there, Republic of Georgia, that's another place. Now, that's where the first wine vines were apparently cultivated after the Great Flood. The ark landed, and then the grapevine variety, whatever, was planted in Georgia. Republic of Georgia was the first known place grapevine, and they have the oldest winemaking on the planet. It's like 8,000 years old. So, that's a direct correlation, and stories from the Bible matching up with a specific place and some of the same things happening. Mount Ararat area. And then you look at this too, this area in Austria. Was that another pocket of survivors of cataclysm? Because there can only be, and then here in Tennessee, they have a huge cave system, and the stories are talking about people walking out of the caves, and then down near what's the Little Tennessee River now, there were massive settlements there, and even the newest of star forts that were supposedly built in the 1500s were right on that same river basin. And this stems back to circa 12,000 years prior. So it seems the resets come, the resets go, and then there's some evidence left of where things were found or formed first, because obviously if you have art, and this is a high level of art, a 4.5-inch figurine that is tight, incredibly good artwork, and then when you're going to fire that so it stays and it doesn't break apart. There's a lot of technology involved in that little figurine. That's way more than what was supposedly known at that time. So when you look around the world, you see these cycles repeating again and again and again. So it seems that things that we're seeing, the way that strings are, and, Ransom, you mentioned on the beginning, is it AI driving each of us with our own individual feeds that's then feeding back on the next cycle upward? So the next time you look at 30 things, that your next posts are more refined to really get you in that, because they're making war like this fashion thing where that girl had that airsoft gun. It was supposed to be an AR, but it was an airsoft gun. But she had like the cool clothes and the cool glasses and like supermodel Instagram style thing, like before, 2018, 19, when people were doing, go to a hotel and do a bunch of photos, and influencers, that's it. And then with that, like making war chic, like it's cool, you're going to fight, it's cool, look how cool I'm dressed, man. That's just absurd, where they're mixing all the social media with the war thing, and then they're putting the business in there too at the same time, and making this cocktail of, like I said, ickiness when you watch it all and you try to see it, and you find out a lot of those images were from earlier times, 2016, 15, different events. They just put it in there and put a different label on it, hoping you wouldn't find it. Because 90% of the people will never know. The only reason Ransom and I know is because we search different kinds of news, looking for different points of view, so we can make a better story, present you the information so you can do your own research after. Because if I or Ransom present it in such a fashion where you're like, that was interesting, shoot, I never heard of that, let me go do more of my own research. And that's what we encourage, do your own research. So, leaving the links, putting out the ideas, and then comparing ideas. Don't listen to us. So I'm going to say it for me. I'm not going to talk for Ransom, but I'm going to say, don't listen to me. Do your own research after we speak. If you find a valid point or some kind of point that you either have some dispute with or you agree with, take it down the rabbit hole for a few hours and then see what you come at some conclusion. Weigh both sides out. man, just the way that the news is portrayed to get, you're right, Ransom. One last thing here. I didn't know anything about this fire because I was kind of eating dinner after I worked. I was working. I usually try to work to about 3 hours in the evening now, 2.5, 3 hours, just before sunset, into the sunset, and then try to get 3 hours of work. Two of us, so it's like 6 man hours of work per day done to do stuff around the gardens, get everything done, like I said, trimming all the trees and, pruning everything out, getting the back field ready, planting a bunch of stuff in the water area, like morning glory down in the creek bed, so we get free veggies and stuff. But I lost my thought, man. I was trying to connect that to something, but never mind. It's one of those nights.
Well, I wouldn't worry too much because
Here, cheers to that. Yeah,
we might have these no-go areas that they're planning. If you've been into reading about the Agenda 20 and Agenda 30, they were kind of open with talking about closing off big sectors of the planet. But that's okay, because they have, like I said, was coming. I mean, I've been harping on this because this is where it's going. Self-driving trucks start to propel land rush near major cities at the Wall Street Journal article here. And I keep seeing these popping up. So companies are about to cut out a large portion of workers just from this autonomous trucking. This is the way of the future. And guess what? Like I said, this will be able to drive through those radiation areas that you're not allowed to go through anymore in Eastern Europe. I thought it was funny. It's pretty bizarre that actually is going on because, I was keeping an eye on Chernobyl. And I realized that was one of the targets that they were going after to seize. So now here's another nuclear plant. So is there a pattern here? I don't know.
Yes, there is. There is. I can see it. Yeah, let me throw you my twisted mind thought here. It's not going to be a real nuclear leak from the plant, but they're going to make it as such. And just like they've done a lot of fake PCR test positives, anything over 28 cycles, they can create a false positive. They can create a positive anything. Just call it a positive. Anything over 28 cycles and they run it again, especially into the 30s. And I think after, 32, 100% of the people are positive. They can fake the test and run as many cycles to get a positive outcome as they want to, and they're faking the numbers through the number of cycles. All right, well, that's well known, man. We've known that for a year now. So that was the way that they could boost up the COVID cases and then decrease them when the vaccine came out to make it look like it was effective and safe. But what if you could fake Geiger counter readings? Because you got to realize all the satellite measurements are all controlled mostly by government. And all the readings of them coming out through the IEA and different kind of energy, atomic energy, associations or whatnot, are all controlled by government. Like none of those are independent that I know of that can give you independent readings. So almost the entire gamut of everything, 99%, would be from an official source for Geiger counter readings. There might be one or two independents that could say, no, there's nothing here, but then they're labeled as conspiracy theorists and crackpots, etc. But what if they did take it offline on purpose, using that fake Geiger counter readings as a combined force like they do with global temperatures, or try to? There's a few other satellite sets out. There's always some breakthrough to get the information out, but then it's always labeled and demonized and gang stalked by all the mainstream media to make it not relevant, while the rest of the pile-on continues with feeding you the misinformation. Geiger counter readings, that's how they're going to do it. They're going to spook everybody with the fire. So there's a major leak. It's like 10 times bigger than Chernobyl, 100 times bigger than Chernobyl. Oh, everything's offline. Don't eat the wheat out of Ukraine. Don't eat the wheat out of Russia. Oh, it explains. But that could even take more production offline. Oh, my gosh. That would probably take half the world's grain offline if that happened. Just saying. That's why I was going in that twisted thought. So think with me there.
Well, if you remember when Chernobyl happened, they had whole portions of seasons where they told everybody that they couldn't eat the reindeer because it was radioactive. So there goes, the backdoor source of meat for Eastern Europe there, depending which way the wind is blowing. If you remember, sometimes it would blow over into the Scandinavian countries, and then they couldn't eat the reindeer for like a year or two because they had radioactive particles in it. Who knows if that's actually going to happen, but it is weird that they went right for those, Chernobyl, and they go for the other power plants. Of course, they could use those power plants because they're being cut off from the world. But if you think that Russia's really going to be hurt by, these weird sanctions, I don't really think so. Russia's like a gas station. They're hardcore into production of their own resources, and they have one of the world's biggest countries with a relatively small population. So they have the entire tundra to tap in case of emergency, with trees and food and oil and everything. They can sit there for quite a while. So it's kind of silly to me that the propaganda is kind of going in that way, that we're just going to be mean to Putin and then he'll stop doing stuff. He's pretty much been open about if his people want to go communist, he'll go communist. And I don't know if that's code for that's what we're about to do, because that's been one of my theories for a long time, is that they were just playing possum. And the reason I say that is because they kept such a close knit relationship with China and agree on so many different things that the Communist Party does, while at the same time portraying that they've, reformed and they're more of a capitalist free society. And you've seen over the years that Putin has been able to stay in office in one form or another, no matter what happens. Like they changed the law, he could run again. And then the other guy was the president, and then they switched places. It's hilarious. And what's so funny about this is our own government has done backdoor deals with Russian pipelines and things like that at the same time as cutting off the energy here in the United States, because we're supposed to be going over to a more green. It's going to be pretty green if the grids are just shut off most of the time, ain't it? Rolling blackouts and rationing because we're supposedly, having a super economic war with two other superpowers. And then at the same time, like you said, it's convenient that the war breaks out in the grain manufacturing center, and then adding on all of these problems with combat zones, radiation, fleeing populations. So what I see is it's a repeat of World War II and World War I, and they're using the same moves and the same propaganda. It's just like you said, it's a repeat and cycle, but it's so in our face this time. And I was showing everybody an article that's talking about AI detecting, basically, it's being a shrink for you, but they're doing this. And believe me, if they have this up, that means people are using it at the NSA and other places. So you got an AI model that detects mental disorders based on what you post on the internet. So what if, I post a lot of Adapt 2030 here and there. Am I getting, classified as a weather denier or a climate denier? Or, you can see the danger of this technology where you're allowing AI to determine whether or not human beings have the right to say things, or they're crazy if they do say them or post them. Talk about control of information.
Yeah, the control of the information of any nuclear fallout. Imagine that would even be scarier than having, I think, a full, detonation over a city or something. I think a leak like this would even be scarier because everybody knows the leak. It's a scary, we've only ever been trained with leaks, right? The nuclear leaks are always super scary, but above ground detonation, nobody really understands that, I guess, unless you were, still alive from Japan and Hiroshima or Nagasaki on the outskirts. Then you would understand that, but otherwise most people don't. So to accommodate, or accustom people to the fear associated with that versus a nuclear leak, it's different. It's a different fear factor. Now one could lead to the other, obviously, but the reason I say that is you're talking about the reindeer and being radioactive, so it takes out a hunting and a meat source for those who are on survival. But think about mercury in the fish. Because whatever it is, we are going to need to go to a more pioneering lifestyle. And that is great because once you touch back into the land, you're going to feel the enhancement of your life. As you get back in, you touch the soil, you touch the wood, feet on the grass, feet in the soil, in the woods, walking. You get back to life force again. But if you're going to be back thinking about survival, going out wild foraging for vegetables, wild foraging for medicines, looking for fruits that you can distill to alcohol, keeping blackberry patches that are wild growing, cultivated enough where you can protect it and go get the berries every morning. But the survival thing, you're thinking about water. The reason I brought up mercury in the fish is if you're going to be if you found a pond, you got to take care that it's replenished and, what is really in the pond in the water. You just don't know when you stumble across a place. Because fish, what is it, turtles, frogs, these types of things that are edibles out of the ecosystem there. I mean, are you on top of a 3-mile island or a love canal kind of thing that was, or if you're further out in the country, is it on top of an old waste dump that was covered with dirt and they sold the property somehow? So think about the water and then the aquatic animals coming out of there that are protein sources too. Yeah, reindeer huge, deer's huge, elk, moose, awesome, but we don't have those here. Got a few elk, but they're not really seen. They're way high up, 6,000 feet, 5,000 feet and above. But everybody has access to fish and turtles and frogs out of a water source. Oh, and by the way, one last thing, algae. The reason it floats on top of the water is because when you're hot, it'll burn your wood so hot you'll melt aluminum if you put too much of it. So that, I don't know how I got on that from the reindeer, but anyway, that was my cycle of thought, is if you're prepping out, you got to be careful of the water source too. Mercury in the fish, radioactive fallout in the reindeer, same, but different, I guess.
So where do you think this is going? Because, I've been seeing articles talking about Germany shipping weapons into the Ukraine. So, once some of these other nation states that have ties with Russia or deals with Russia, like Germany does, because like 90% of their energy really comes from Russia. If they're backdoor dealing weapons to the Ukrainians, you would think that might be considered maybe an act of war. And then you have other countries that are doing similar stuff. What do you think about the new alliances that you can kind of see being drawn here? And also think about the idea like this, like no time in history, to my knowledge, has the entire world participated in an event like the one that happened the last 2 years. Even our supposed enemies, allies, etc., all were putting on face coverings and all were going to, get the new medication and save the world. And just like that, the entire world has gone over to this Ukraine conflict, even though there's been much more larger, invasions, if you want to call it that, in the past. You can name Syria, Iraq, you could go on and on. There was Tunisia, there was the Arab Spring, there was so many of these conflicts. You can go to Georgia, Chechnya, and then you remember we were bombing Sarajevo for a long time with Clinton. This has been so long and ongoing. What do you think about the bizarre turn to focus all of the news worldwide, including the United Nations, and watch you'll start seeing the WHO and other organizations like that jump on with trying to, make Russia the bad guy? It's like a televised wrestling event. And I'm expecting here in 2024 for them to rehash Donald Trump and try to make him the good guy, because of what's going on. It just seems like a complete production from the start to the finish, because they hyped us up on this Russia stuff for the past, 5 years, the Russiagate stuff, the dossiers, etc. There was this person and that person. And then you have yeah. And then you have like Swalwell or whatever his name is right now talking about we need to expel all of the Russian students from the schools. And this is coming from the guy that got caught sleeping with a Chinese agent for like 6 or 7 years straight.
And nobody did anything in the Congress about it. Nobody even batted an eyebrow. Like how do you go put a citizen's arrest on that guy and then try him for treason? By ourselves, an individual. The Congress didn't do it. I mean, that's the ridiculousness of quote unquote elected politicians. But I have an answer for you, Ransom. I have an answer. The answer is 500. 500. That's how many ounces of silver are used in every single missile. So what's locked up in missiles right now is locked up, because silver is the fastest and best conductor of electricity. Nanoseconds faster than copper. But if you're ever using a guidance system and a communication point, that extra 1, 2, 3 nanoseconds makes a difference. Hell, it's not your money, it's the government's money. They'll just spend it and charge you more with higher taxes, print more. Who cares? Just get it and we'll do whatever, there's no. Here, you walk in, speaking of James Bond, how he walks in and he just goes, give me your best room. And they're like, Prince Sweet. He goes like, I'll take it. And he hands the black card over. Doesn't even ask how much it is. Just like, I'll take it. Because there's always money there. So cost is not even a thing that ever comes into the mind. It'll be the same with this, with the silver. You put 500 ounces of silver in a missile, like the governments don't care. What's it, $25 an ounce? Now. But then what happens when it turns into the money, a store of value, as it has through history, along with gold, and the military's using an enormous amount. They probably have used up an enormous amount of stockpiles where, guess what? A whole bunch of Raytheon and new weapons manufacturers got a bevy of new orders in these last 3 or 4 days. They need more silver. And it's just, Bosnia-Herzegovina. You forgot that on the list. And then how they demonized Saddam Hussein with weapons of mass destruction. It's the same exact thing we're seeing again. Same exact thing. How many chapters do we go through with this ridiculous? Now, the weapons build out needing more silver. That's going to become a strategic metal, literally a strategic metal at that point, along with an investment metal and new money. And then, energy systems that Cliff High talks about, Tesla technologies that actually burn silver through some sort of ionization process. It actually scrapes atoms off of the surface while it's creating energy. So that will be a used that goes in on the input, but it's completely used up. So you never get your bar of silver, round of silver out of it. It's actually atomized in the process of making electricity. So these 3 things inbound with silver make me think, 500 ounces per, and they've blown off thousands and thousands of missiles. And you mentioned Germany was going to send like 2,500 more. So, think about the metals value that's just locked in these things anyway. And if silver goes to $600 to $6,000 an ounce on a hyperinflationary thing, you got millions of dollars per missile in metals, not the weapon. You could move all that money all in there in the weapon systems, but oops. And then after the war ceasefire, but hey, we just deposited, $3 trillion in your country by leaving all the missiles there because all the silver's in the missiles. Now, maybe that's just too far-fetched to think on how a wealth transfer would take place in a physical metal form without having to use the London Bullion Metals Exchange or the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, or if it's CBOE for more of the commodities on the ag side. It seems like it's a wealth transfer of metals at the same time under the guise of a war. I'm just saying, maybe that's too far-fetched.
It's not that far-fetched, and you think about right now. So you're trying to tell me that if I stockpile my silver now, these militaries are going to shoot off all the excess silver out there, raising the price of silver in the future. And then also think about right now, if you have stock in, like Raytheon, Kronos, or one of these other missile defense systems that are getting transferred third party through these other countries, because let's face it, only a couple of countries actually make war, high-tech war stuff. You got Israel, Germany, the United States, China, Russia, and people are buying and selling these things. So if you're telling me there's all of the silver in there, you could just see that the price for it, especially with the continued war, because like you said, it's our government. They don't care. They'll just come take yours if they need some more. They don't even need to wait to mine it out of the ground. And then I didn't even think about that. You got, I bet there is such a thing as a recovery of these metals in the collapsed, war-torn areas if people are going through the rubble to find all of this stuff. I don't know how much is left at the end of that, but you could just imagine. First of all, they don't have to fire the weapons, not all of them. They can just take, like you said, it could be just undercover wealth transfer in the guise of a weapons transfer in a completely blown out of proportion situation that's going on. I'm sure it doesn't feel blown out of proportion for those people in the combat zone, wherever it's at, but I know that it's a really complicated thing that's goes over decades, the relationship that's going on there. And it really doesn't have much to do with the Western world, except for we're making it about us. And that's amazing that much silver is in there. How long until, their reserves run out and they need more silver? And how would that, show on the market? Like, how would you see that? Just a dramatic, unexplained rise in the value of silver overnight?
Yeah, because just do simple math. 500 ounces, if they blow off 1,000 of the missiles, and so far Germany's guaranteed 2,500 Stingers or some kind of surface to surface, surface to air, ground to ground, whatever, ground to tank missile, whatever. Some of the ones that they're arming, so 2,500 total. So even if you're taking 1,000, that's 500,000 ounces. 1,000 missiles equals 500,000 ounces. So what if under the guise of war they wanted to send 50,000 missiles over there, but the amount of silver was in there and it was more of a wealth transfer? Because you could never get that out of a metals exchange without driving the price up to the stratosphere. But you're right, if you could do it in an underhanded way, move money this way, metals, it's twisted the way. And is there even that much metal out there to move around? You're right. I mean, they would probably confiscate every mine and every bullion warehouse across the United States. Just special forces will drop in with helicopters and lock off everywhere they know there's a repository or depository for precious metals, and then just scoop it out. Thanks. How would you protect it? You're not going to go bury it in the woods. I mean, what if you forgot where you put it, or you lost your map, or somebody found your map and went and found it? I don't know. Precarious times, but that's a lot of metals. I can really see the reset involving cryptocurrency, metals, carbon sequestration taxes or carbon taxes, and digitizing the forest and not letting anybody in there and putting an eco value on it, and then issuing some kind of new fiat off of that digitized or non-inhabited forest as a value, as it never changes. Nobody cuts trees. Nobody lives there. We use this as a sequestering zone, and then we can build value back in, again, reverse it back into the carbon credit system by the same forests that are being kept pristine without any human habitation on them, plus the gold, silver, crypto, central bank digital currencies, and we could get some sort of new system of trade back up and running. That's only if Ransom and I aren't just talking here, that things that seem too planned are, actually. So, Ransom, we got 30 seconds left. What do you think?
Well, when we got back, I kind of wanted to talk about banking and the future of monetary systems that go around the system, because basically, like I said, today was one of those lockout moments.
Ransom Godwin, 420 TV Freedomist Films, and David Dubine right here. We'll be back in 2 minutes, 2 seconds. Thanks for staying with us. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Listener supported. Please remember that donation if you enjoy free speech. We'll see you in 2 minutes, 2 seconds.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Are you interested in the paranormal, murder mystery, real natural law? Do you enjoy interviews with amazing guests? Then join Crypt Rick every Monday night 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Right here on Revolution Radio. Studio A, freedomslips.com. Crypt Rips, I've been thinking. Welcome to the crypt.
Join me at Revolution Radio, Studio B, at 11 a.m. on Saturday for Free Association, when we take a look at philosophy, spirituality, psychology, social issues, and geopolitics. It's every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern on Studio B at freedomslips.com.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Galactic Interstellar Council on Revolution Radio Studio A, Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Join us as we traverse the starseed paradigm, as expressed in the time-space continuum that we know as the divine expression of love and light. Integrating this conscious unity into the galactic paradigm. So welcome all, both terrestrial beings and galactic beings as one. So be it. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at higher risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps. All right, thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
And welcome back for the second hour of Mini Ice Age Conversations. David Dubine right here with Ransom Godwin, 420 TV Freedomist Films on the dial. Anyway, I appreciate you coming back and spending your valuable time as we try to think about what's happening in the world. The shift is planned, so that's fine. And understand everything else you're seeing out there is to create mental confusion. And at the same time, cutting lines of communication, internet, thought. I can't believe they would ban RT of all things. That'd be like trying to ban CNN or something in another country. Imagine what the American government would do if you said, we're going to ban all CNN everywhere across the planet. They would be furious. And the Europeans would be furious that you tried to ban that. But okay, everybody ban RT. So you got to see how much more important now is it than ever to think about free speech and keeping that alive. So if you like this type of free speech, freedomslips.com, right at the very top, different ways to donate to continue running costs, production costs, and studio costs to keep this Line of communication open for you. It's going to be one of the last ones. It's going to be one of the last ones. So let's talk about banking, Ransom, because we left off right before the break there. You wanted to talk about banking and how you see things moving forward. You know, I see the new asset class and the asset values associated off things created out of nothing, like the digitizing of an ocean, and then the ocean species within there having a value, and then that being off limits, and that will be then put on the blockchain as a value of something, along with the forests and all this ridiculousness of creating things out of nothing to have value, just creating the illusion of the value based on it's a fiat in a different form. So it's coming, the banking system's changing, crypto will be there, but again, this weird new fiat form of something based, you know how gold base was before, this will be based on other things natural on the planet. Eco assets that will be then put against to create a new fiat with legs of gold and crypto. So, Ransom, sorry, long-winded. What do you want? Thanks for bringing us back into the banking talk here. I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Well, I was just kind of bringing it up because, today I tried to do some banking online, and then I realized that I was locked out of everything. And I thought, well, maybe the app's messed up or the internet ain't working. So then, I figure out it's working fine. I go to the website. You can't log into the website. And I use a USAA, which is kind of like a military banking institution. But it just showed me that how fast it could just turn off at a moment's notice. So I went and I found this website that kind of shows the downed websites and stuff. But it showed me how fast your banking's cut off. And think about it. You got crypto. You can't you can't get it through your bank if your bank is frozen. And we've been seeing online in other countries them using banking as a political weapon against people, freezing accounts, things like that. And so we get to here, you got to wonder, with all of the countries being hard to tell apart from one another as far as totalitarian measures that they've used, right? It's hard to tell, did one day your bank just get turned off because you said something bad on the internet or something like that. So I go to this website and I'm looking, and it's showing banking is normal. There's no complaints. And then boom, within a 20-minute period, there's 10,000 people that obviously, or 8,000, I rounded it up a little bit, but you imagine that war breaks out. The grid goes down, all of these different reasons why you can't do anything because they have banking totally set up on a digital frame network where everything is digital. Even the cryptocurrencies and other things that you have backed up, like stocks and different things, you can't do anything with them if the markets freeze for whatever reason. Say we went to nuclear war tomorrow, you couldn't use any of your resources to help you. So how would you get around that when you need to do instant banking? And really, I kind of answered my own question when we were talking about the amount of silver in those missiles. And, what would the government do when they run out of silver, where they want to come get yours? And there's multiple reasons they want yours, is because you can use that for real monetary worth, because people know that whatever system pops up later, silver is still going to be worth a lot. And not only that, there's all of these products that there's an endless supply of need for silver, from electronics to antibiotics. And so besides silver, like what does someone do when they're just completely cut off from the digital matrix finance? And then one more point I wanted to show you, this article that's from spectatorworld.com. It's the creeping authoritarianism of facial recognition. And what I thought was really funny about this is they're using Russia as the bad guy in this article, instead of pointing out that China has been using their Dragonfly software for a long time, and it's kind of the top of the line facial recognition system intertwined with the social credit score. They point out, no, it's bad Russia, and but it's coming to America. It's here. Well, it's been here for a long time. If you've gone to Home Depot and you've used the automated system, or Walmart, or any of these things, you're being facially recognized to link you to your account, which, like I said, could be turned off at any time. So you imagine you just come here, you go to the store, it looks at your face, they turn off your bank because you are, completely turned off because of something you did or some political view you have. And now the system has deemed you, what were they calling them a couple years ago? Deplorable. The AI system and the facial recognition system just turned off your bank account. And that sounded like sci-fi all the way up until now, which obviously it's not now, that you've been seeing people getting their donations stolen, their bank accounts frozen. And if you noticed, what I thought was a big cue that something major really is going to happen as far as conflict is the fact that Switzerland took a side after all of these years, as known as the non-biased banking institution that never takes sides. Right? They're completely neutral. Not anymore, right?
Yeah, interesting comment about science fiction of before is the now, and we're seeing it. Of everything science fiction you thought was possible. Even Minority Report was sci-fi, but now it's real. So think about what's now is sci-fi. How's that going to pan out? Because what we consider sci-fi, what is occurring now was, how many decades ago? But now in the sci-fi world, we can imagine, it seems, hundreds of years in the future. But how's that going to take shape and form? And see, I understand these protocols going on, and the plan is to create as much chaos as possible. So you will switch a system. You will absolutely beg to switch the system. That's the whole plan. But I don't get it at that point, unless going to this transhumanist thing where they're trying to implant people with wearable implanted technologies. I just don't see where the end game is once all the money and the power is accrued. And even if they got everybody onto the digital systems and everything's taxed and traced and, every word that uttered has a score associated with it. I bet would be like a -10 because you're getting too comfortable going back to base, reconnecting with the river of consciousness with all thought that could be pulled back down into this realm again. So maybe the word Om would be deemed illegal. Because you could tap into source with that and see, what is the end point where they don't want anybody to tap into source again? I mean, you can't make Om, or even in your mind, you could think that and get that vibration feeling. Like, how do you cut humans off from source itself, from the oneness, from the fabric of the third dimension that we're in right now? You can't cut off. It is within you. You're it. The vibration holding all of it together is the vibration of God. How do you stop that connection? I mean, is that really what they're trying to do? Like, how far would you have to take somebody out of vibratory state where nothing in the physical realm had even one vibration onto their perception? Whether it been solar winds, solar particles, cosmic rays, winds, jet streams, hail fronts, wind fronts, whatever. The pressure changes. Zero would affect the human. Even resonance from the sun that changes vibration in the electrical spheres of the brain, how you perceive reality. So even if they cut all of that off and kept humans physical by themselves here and just completely sort of in a soundproof, what are those chambers they put you in where you can't feel anything, sensory deprivation chambers, and then what? I mean, is that the end goal? I don't know, because it seems like they're trying to go that way with control of what, but what's the end purpose? They can only take us so far before you really do start to need to think about interdimensional realms or something off planet, because it makes zero sense at that point of that much control, except you might have to take a step off the deep edge and start thinking about what else is going on there.
I think that's exactly what they're trying to do. I think, on one hand, they're going to be reducing the population, and on the other hand, people are going to be completely out of it as far as the 3D realm, because they'll be wearing things like Apple. And I want to tell you something about Apple. If you've ever bought their products, like I remember I bought one of the first iPads, and then a couple years later, they came out with another iPad and then another iPad. But eventually they just turn off the service and the coding to your old device. So there's nothing wrong with your device. It can be in mint condition, look like a brand new piece of technology, but it doesn't do anything because the code doesn't work for it anymore. And they've been doing that with the phones and getting people on this, really addictive thing to get the new iPhone. And now they're going to start replacing the phones with contact lenses, earpieces, and I don't know if you've ever seen this, but there's a little fancy kind of music thing that's going around. It's like a little thing that you strap across your vest, and it makes your body vibrate in a certain way with the music and whatever entertainment you're watching. Little items like that, when you see these being, kind of conjoined into the same thing, like a same package, you got glasses Apple had before, but now it's a contact lens. So they want to cut you off completely. Of course, and you're going to have an audio input. And this just makes sense with their whole idea of brain implant. They want the population so unplugged from nature and plugged into their thing, complete with AI churches. And this way they can control everybody's opinion. Next time they have one of these things like a pandemic or an invasion, they just update everybody. Update today, you're pro-Ukraine and you're anti-Putin. Tomorrow, what is it? Whatever the thing is that they switch it to. And what a perfect time to start adding these ideas in and incorporating them into society, where even if it was AI or just a group of weird transhumanists or even extraterrestrials to kind of get off the ancient aliens things, it could be extraterrestrials. It could be actually, how would they assimilate into some other, communal group of sentient beings other than through technological ways and math? And if you could just introduce little toys and gadgets into a society until you turn off all of their senses, including their sixth senses, you can completely control that population from its opinions to its trends. And maybe if you didn't fit into that population, say you were an alien that didn't have a gender and you didn't like binary gender systems, you would want to erase that, or any other thing that didn't agree with your way of your culture. So what is the AI culture? What is the transhuman culture or extraterrestrial culture that they're putting on us? Whatever it is, it has a 100% degree of control of your six senses. If you believe in the sixth sense, I do. I believe that we do have an extrasensory perception. And what better way to mask that into a changeover of society? It reminds me so much of the Time Machine with the what was it, the Eloi and the Morlocks, in that, where there's just two completely different societies. One's like an ant colony with only one guy in there that's a super genius, and the rest of them are kind of brunt workers. And then on the top you have kind of a regular genetic agrarian society that they eat, that they consume, and just like government. It really couldn't exist without consuming the essence of its citizenry.
Well, you think that was sixth sense would turn on during times like these, where you start to just intuitively know that changes, and intuitively that information you'd be hearing is correct or incorrect. Because it seems to be hitting that sort of, hyperspace point at this time where you can almost smell the falseness of it. And it's not just me, it is everybody across the board, including people you would have never thought years ago that would have said that. And I know I said that before, but I was talking last year, but it's even more this year, of just an enormous amount of people that you would never consider going against the grain are suddenly questioning everything. So it means one of two things: that the vibration of our solar system and the area of space where our solar system is transiting through is at a higher energy state of the area we just passed out of, that was more just empty-ish, not as dense on the plasma, not as dense on the space debris like rocks, comets, meteors that would come through. There's areas that are incredibly dense. I mean, there's areas where you'd see like 10,000 shooting stars in an evening dense as we pass through some of these areas of space. But if it was vibrating faster, humans would perceive things faster, different. No, I shouldn't say faster, it was differently. Because the old system that was comprised of setting itself up in a different state of vibration and frequency. So think it was a frequency. Think about your radio dial. If I set the society up as a control mechanism at 100.1 FM, and suddenly things turn faster, and that 100.1 didn't, in the audible range, wasn't there anymore, because you're going to have to go far up the dial and catch up with the people again. When you tune into like 104.7, you're going to be like, whoa, you're way down there. So there's this rift of, now government's going to have to jump up to like 108.2 or 109 on the dial to get ahead of the people to try to put a new system on top. So what is it? The people waking up because of the vibratory changes? I mean, these things have been mapped out through antiquity. Zodiac is part of that. I mean, you look around through the 12 signs of the Zodiac, you look up at Chinese mythologies, and you get the 12 different animals, right? So wherever you look at it, it's 12, 12, 12, 12. It's across the entire planet. Knowing that there's 12 regions or vibrations of space that we transit through in any certain time during these 2,000-year periods, culminating in one cycle of the grand cycle, well, the 20,750-year cycle. So don't you think at this time people's sixth sense would be turning on even more if they went into these dire situations? I mean, is it a point where humanity has lost all of its very base, survival instincts, that they're really even, are you telling me that you're turning off some senses of seeing, that sort of thing different, but you're telling me that they're able to get down to the rootest of the root of the human and turn off that primal survival instinct that deep? That's scary, man. They're really trying to change a species then.
I think that's exactly why they're deploying this technology now, is what you're saying, is that there's a percentage of the population that would necessarily start kind of evolving on their own and getting an intuition about events that are happening, a sixth sense of what things are true and not true. And I think we have seen that over the past couple of years, where a lot of people weren't believing the narrative. It's just that the overwhelming control mechanism kind of overshadowed them. And you like how that they flipped it in 5 years, where the people were calling the media companies the fake news, misinformation specialists, the prostitutes, et cetera, et cetera. But now it's the media that's calling the public the fake news and the misinformation. And I was showing my audience this article right here. It's back in February, but it's talking about the media is already demanding that the metaverse be censored for misinformation. And what this is exactly what you were talking about. They don't want people to use common sense, sixth sense, or any of the regular senses. It reminds me of, you remember the old introduction to The Outer Limits there. We control the vertical and the horizontal. We control the sound and the light. There was a lot to that statement that people didn't realize in the time, that they were really telling you something with that, because since then they've developed and deployed scientific programs that affect your emotion. We've talked about that before. They use it in movies, certain light spectrums, colors, music that they know will vibrate a certain thing inside of you that will cause a certain emotional response. And they constantly do this to the mass population. It's like a vampire effect, where they give people fake scenarios, fake people with fake situations, and then the audience kind of gives this all of their emotional energy over to this fake fakeness, the fake entity, if you will. And then they have none of that real, genuine emotion to drive their own life. And it's becoming increasingly so because, like you can add flicker rate to that. And you imagine with the TV, you could always turn it off and go outside and stuff. But if you're wearing a device that's on you half of the time, you're not going to be able to turn it off so easily. And I think they were showing a lot there in that old introduction. They were just straight telling you the truth that you were at that time going into a new generation of scientific propaganda. And now we're at the end result of that, where they're trying to literally go inside of our body to block off this thing that human beings have as a natural creature. So they must be really scared of that. And if you think about all of the things that they try to control on the world, this seems to be one of the main important things, is that they capture the will of the people and direct it into their kind of narrative. And if you remember, this is just like in Roman times when they would throw all the bread and give them entertainment, is they knew as long as they had the populace's kind of animalistic mind occupied, they would never really see the bars around them.
We can't see the bars now, but if the sun is actually changing its output, then the visible light spectrum and frequency that we can view with our eyes should also change, and perhaps these beings will come into view, and so will the prison bars. Hence, the more control to knock out more of the perception. Because if you could nullify that as much as you could, like you say, through what we consider 200 years of this knowledge of how the human mind works and stimulus and response, we give it 200 years. But what if it's really, as things were talked about in prehistory, that the same rulers of these cities and countries and continents today in 2022 are the same ones that were around 70,000, 130,000, 400,000 years ago. The same, just on another rodeo again. The frequency would change, things would become visible to the eye, perhaps these prison bars, but you would also know the onset of the cycle. And you could gauge it by having all these things already staged up, ready. They're almost like Illuminati card deck, where, whoa, you just take that out and throw it right on. It's almost as if it's ready to throw on. That Illuminati card game is actual in motion from the time that it's laid on the table to instantaneous to just several weeks or 2 months to make the card play out. Perhaps these last couple hundred years is the Illuminati card game being played card by card in real time on the table, that then takes actual real effect out in our what we consider world, because there's overseers that could watch from afar. I don't know, you'd have to do an apogee, carriagee, or apogee and perigee launch sequence to catch back up, I guess.
I kind of wonder, this may not sound positive, but it actually is. And we were kind of talking about this before. There has been 2,058 or somewhere right around that number of official claimed documented nuclear weapons tests, or they dropped, used it as a weapon a couple of times there in Japan. But 2,058 times we've popped the genie on splitting the atom and unleashing this massive amount of power. Now, we're still here. Everything's still going. And if you really analyze that, they practiced in the most remote places on Earth. Where? The Russian tundra, out in the middle of the southwest of the United States, in ancient land that has ancient writing of an alternate history, and then also out in the middle of the Pacific. Now, if you look around the globe right now, there could be a small nuclear exchange. But don't worry, because everything will kind of be going along as normal, even with several of those exploding once again. And where would they probably go? Say in the tundra of Russia, where really nothing was affected. Maybe they decided to take out one of the failing cities in the United States, or something way out in the middle of the desert, something like
I got one. Alberta tar sands. Oil production in the middle of nowhere. Alberta tar sands.
Yeah, there's all of these targets that they could pop, scare the world, stop production of everything, stop travel, stop everything, and really not affect the overall health of the planet in all seriousness, because they know that it won't. You could see several islands in the Pacific, or like I said, even an American city like Phoenix could disappear, and it wouldn't even hurt the overall infrastructure of the United States. And they could brag for years that they're rebuilding it as a symbol of the New World Order and the war that happened with the rising phoenix out of the ashes. It was always weird that they named it that, to me, out in the middle of the desert. And if you've ever been to Phoenix, it's like this super hot place that you wouldn't expect anybody would want to live, but yet there's a thriving metropolis there with a bunch of empty homes from years of housing market issues, where they built lots of empty homes. And then think about China. They have several cities that are just empty that they could hand over to this new narrative of a large nuclear exchange amongst the countries. And then everybody would agree that they either sign a pact for a one world order. And if you really wanted to seal the deal, you could introduce an alien species that will only deal with us if we have one world vote. I don't know. Sci-fi, maybe. The fact that these weird people are actually talking about nuclear war leads me to think that, maybe it's not so sci-fi.
Or they've been, not that I'm saying it's any way, shape, or form something positive. But yeah, the coyotes are out tonight, so I have a couple dogs here. And also, if you're going to think about your protection, you might want to get a couple animals. The coyotes have been up and down the valley. Well, I heard them about maybe 3 kilometers, maybe a couple miles up the valley here earlier tonight. So I'm not up for shooting and eating a coyote, that's for sure. Coyote's nasty. But, the narratives in the media have been built up about everything that we understand, right? From the economy to the enemy to anything and everything. To the best travel show host, the best chef, the coolest show. All the way down to the politicians, the coolest politician, the best looking politician, whatever XYZ politician. It's every perception that you've seen is built in Hollywood or on the screen, except for those physical people around you. I'm just thinking that if they could fake it that much to switch your reality right now, could they not fake it that much about the scariness and the real damage of and long-lasting effects of the radiation? Because you're right, if they blew off that many before, it would only take 3 or 4 sacrificial points on the northern and southern hemisphere. No, they wouldn't do it in the southern hemisphere because that's where all the money's gone to. So this is a northern hemisphere play only.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're right. That's where all the billionaires and everybody ran down.
Yeah, they've all gone out of the southern hemisphere, haven't they? And those governments down there have taken hard pipe-hitting control of the countries, from Australia to New Zealand to South Africa and Zimbabwe. And Brazil now, too, going into the favelas, and the army's going in there a lot and controlling things. They're really locking down a whole bunch of places in the southern hemisphere right now.
I'm just saying, though, it would be easy to, like you said, a sacrificial targets with low populations. And then regardless, even if they didn't do that, they could congratulate themselves for years about how we avoided the Third World War, and how, all of your leaders and their lockdowns and their mandates was actually sensible, because look what they did for us, averting thermonuclear war. Congratulations. But you're going to have to deal with a couple of concessions, like less food, less trade, less freedom, less travel. And, just you're going to have to deal with that to be patriotic.
Yeah, but how many of those sacrificial locations do you think it would take before what you're talking about, negotiations with other entities or whatnot, and world government head? Remember, scriptures talk about somebody that would be worshipped, a one person, but we found nobody anywhere remotely on the planet like that. Now, it doesn't say whether it's an off-planet, interdimensional, or actual physical Homo sapiens sapien. Maybe it's a Denisovan giant that walks out of the cave in somewhere in the Ukraine because it was disturbed by the bombs or something. Who knows? But it's something like that where this person will be revered by all of the planet to solve the problem as the one to stop these wars that we're talking about right here. But that was, okay, so it got a little off base there, but how many of these sacrificial locations do you think it'll be before it would come to that negotiation time? 1, 2, 4, 5, 6?
Actually, if you were the world government and you wanted to hurry up self-fulfilling prophecy of the religions and all of that, I think all you'd have to do is pop Rome, Jerusalem, and Mecca. And what's funny is they've had fake newsreels on movies that had exactly that, involving Wolf Blitzer, doing cameos on a movie.
I just saw that the other night. That's the craziest thing. No way. I saw that last week. We dropped in on a movie just to have some dinner for, 30 minutes while we ate real quick. Just wanted something on, a little action. And it was that one. Yeah, right in there, the fake movie set. And they did those exact 3 places.
Yeah, and then all 3 of those are ancient cities that have to do with tales of, one could say extraterrestrials. If you wanted to, you could go there if you're not a religious person. But those are all, super important religious places. Of course, you have the Vatican because it's the control of the ex-Roman Empire that became the Catholic Empire there. And then you have Mecca, where you have the Prophet Muhammad and a connection extraterrestrial, because they all do the revolution or walk around the little meteorite there, like they're going around the box of Saturn there. And then Jerusalem, which is important to all 3 religions, and all 3 have a context of extraterrestrial contact or spiritual God, all depending on your view. But you had Jacob's ladder there. You had Jesus Christ supposedly risen from the grave and ascending to heaven there. The Prophet Muhammad ascended there. So it's a really important place. Plus, it's a place where they say they had the Ark of the Covenant stored for a long time. It's the 2-time Solomon's Temple, the Dome on the Rock, which, if you're into biblical prophecy, has to be destroyed and flattened for them to build a 3rd Solomon's Temple there, or another one. Maybe I'm wrong on the number, but I know that the Dome on the Rock has to disappear there, and that's a mosque that's been kind of sitting there for a long time. And if you go off into the extraterrestrial realm, a lot of people believe that's one of the original launch pads for the gods there, talked about in Sumerian tales, right there, and right next to it in Lebanon. And Baalbek. So imagine if all 3 of those places were just gone. The New World Order now has no religion. And if you know that they're more of a communist point of view, you remember Mao Tse-tung said religion is poison, and the way to control people is to get rid of that.
Yeah, how many stories of the ziggurat and actual dimensions for space launch pads are there? I think it's in the book of Daniel. Very specific dimensions, and then they're found. But at the same time, what we understand about modern technology, it is for a rocket launching chamber, not a pad. It goes underground. So how old is this tech that's being recycled now? And for sure, as we march through this change here, do not really put faith that it's the very first time it's ever happened, because it's not. It's probably the 16,000th time that it's happened. And the way that it's being handled this time, I'm not sure if it's been handled the exact same way for the last 5,000 times since this. or the last 100 or the last 10, but whatever it is, this reset is being handled and, let's say, coordinated by those who have participated in the same exact events, plural, in the past. I mean, have we gotten to this state of technology before 30,000 years ago? Very possible. 70,000 years ago, even more probable. You know, we're the youngest out of a cataclysmic event right now. 12,000 years, that is nothing for development of humanity. After the last ice age, go back 90,000 years. That ice would have stabilized 20,000 years into the event. And from 70,000 years prior to, say, 30,000 years prior, which is 4 times longer than we have been here now, would have been stable environment, stable planting, stable harvest seasons that they could have had a society once they realized where the weather patterns were normally and how seasons shifted. 4 times longer. Do you think they would have developed something and been, I just, I look at it, we're a very young interglacial species right now. The change is here. Heading into the grand solar minimum, we're at the very end of this interglacial, which is the longest one ever recorded. So expect vast changes. But to what point, though? I just still, okay, if we go into an ice age, okay, let humanity go into an ice age. But then is it the same controllers? They're going to try to hold on to power. They're going to run underground, wait 20,000 years and pop up with a brand new tech that they've been developing underground. And this ice age society is reformed sort of into villages, and they pop back in and start to put layers of, fake government things on top. And, they'll start it like they did now. We've only seen 12,000 years of it. So imagine if you had stable growth seasons for 40,000 years, you'd have to live through another 30,000 years of this getting more intense. Hence, they're talking about what? Planetary cracking devices that were overused in energy and for the wrong reasons, again, for mystical disappearances of vast advanced societies 30,000 years ago. So, Ransom, I just don't know. I think we're back on the Ferris wheel once again, and the ziggurats and those areas in Mesopotamia and South Africa and Zimbabwe explain a lot.
I was looking at this space junk. I don't know if you saw that article about the unknown rocket that's heading to the moon. They're saying it's going to make a big impact there. I kind of wonder if this has anything to do with what's going on. If you've noticed in the past couple of years, all we've really heard about in actual supposed news from the different companies is this little Cold War going on in space where, China showed us that they could knock out one of their own satellites. Then Russia does it. Then China admits they have a little trash AI-driven satellite that's cleaning up the junk. And then we have junk hitting the other satellites. And then SpaceX puts all their low Earth orbit ones underneath this layer. And, a bunch of them fell out of the sky on the last blast. It makes me wonder if really what's all going on with at least in the low Earth orbit, is they're trying to arrange their magnetic proof satellite new systems up there before whatever happens, because I think that will be who really controls everything, is who still has a control on the Earth orbit. And I kind of want to make you think about the Project for a New American Century, where we started first seeing these major changes in the structure of the government, including Homeland Security and all these other things. But it all fits into the grand solar minimum idea when you start talking about their plans for the future, which we're living in now. So this is an example of something that you can go read and see their plans and then think about what's going on right now. And you'll realize that they're right on track for a completely AI Air Force, and so are the other nations. They're completely on track for controlling low Earth orbit, and that's what the United States said their plan was. Now, I don't know what the major, geopolitical implications are between the neocons and the leftists, but they seem to be in unison and seem to be on track for whatever the same plan is. And all indications are that they have sold the United States out, and that they've been waiting for some kind of scenario to explain why we're going to have to change our lifestyle over here, and that they can eradicate some of the fundamental ideas that we're based on, because right there in the Constitution indicates that every citizen of our country, at least, has unalienable rights to live and pursue happiness, which includes growing your own food, cultivating your own property, and in that way you can always ignore what's going on around the world. So in that way, it's kind of positive what's going on. And some of these, they're threatening with the Great Reset, of course, massive shortages of electricity and blackouts. And I think all of that is to get people, hooked on these new technologies, and then take that and still participate in it. What do you think this is about? Like, we're all of a sudden planning all of these space missions, and then all of a sudden we're covering up those news with pandemic, with war, with etc. But behind the scenes, there's a lot of impressive stuff actually happening, preparing for a massive change, and you can kind of see the indicators going on in space, and the way that these countries are moving around, preparing for massive food shortages.
Yeah, they are preparing for massive food shortages. I'll give you a quick timeline here, but I wanted to dovetail into that last thought of, you said there's an object or a satellite or something heading toward the moon that's going to impact the moon. Well, I do remember a fair few years back, they had also something that they intended to plunge into the middle of a crater on the moon to see what it was made of. And there was no impact or explosion because it ripped through the outer, what is considered probably hull of a craft, and just disappeared into the crater with just like it would come through the side of an aluminum airplane. Well, if you're going to listen to urban legend, there was a race living inside the moon, and that they were told and communicated, you ever do that again, we are going to be at war with you. And here you are telling me number two. Now that's urban legend. I'm just throwing it out there because this is one of those nights. There's all urban legend that I'm referencing here. That after the communication was, you never send another plug or anything into this quote unquote moon ever again because you're penetrating the aluminum hull or whatever. But you're telling me there's a second projectile going in there. That's going to break through the second time. And once that is, that will be war declared on the moon species. Whatever inhabits the moon is an internal, like, hollow sphere. So urban legend says, okay, but I'm just trying to put those two together. You're saying a second one's going there. Was the same thing as like agitating. Not 1 inch east, my friends. Not an inch east. And here they are in Ukraine, and they're like 2 feet from the border. We're going to put a Minuteman nuke in there into Moscow in 4 minutes, or 5 minutes, excuse me. 4.38 minutes, okay. Between 4 and 5 minutes, they would have no time to respond at all. And that's where you want to put those nukes right there in Ukraine. That's insane. Like, not what I'm old enough to know when the Berlin Wall went down. That was like the biggest story ever that was on for weeks, plural. And to see that and then know what's really going. I mean, yeah, some people who had never known any of the history behind it that are born well beyond that, like somebody who's 25 years old now, they're not going to remember that. So, pushing the tiger to create the war, same thing. If you send a projectile into the moon the second time based on urban legend, that would spark a war with an alien species, quote unquote, that inhabits the interior of the moon. There you get your artificial moon landing or artificial whatever alien invasion that these guys talk about. Just trying to connect those because I was drawing some pictures when you were talking. But anyway, go ahead. But
weird,
I got a timeline for you. Yeah, I'm curious what you think about that. But I got a timeline for you after.
Well, no, I was just saying they're doing it in a really occulty way, because first they said it was SpaceX, and then SpaceX said, no, that's not ours. So China, finally says, it's ours. It's just a malfunctioning rocket. They don't explain nothing about it. We really have no idea what it is. It's so, shrouded in mystery. But they're saying that it's going to make a whole 33 feet to 66 feet across. Right. And that's supposed to hit tomorrow on Friday. So supposedly, people will be able to authenticate that in a couple days with satellite photos.
Where is it going to land? Hopefully in my front yard so I can pick pieces up and sell it on eBay. Oh, no, sorry. It's government property. I have to give it back. My bad. Oh, and my land's radioactive now. They're going to confiscate my land. Damn it. I guess that was a bad day for a satellite to drop on my land.
But it's 33 feet on the moon, man. It's 33. No, because they always throw these numbers in. I'm surprised at how often it's like they kind of mess with people that believe in gematria and stuff. So they'll always put these on these articles. But I'm curious, what if that's not even a out of place satellite, and it's actually a satellite or a rocket, as they're saying, that has a payload that they actually intended on sending to the moon for one reason or another. We all hear these rumors of space bases, either extraterrestrial. A lot of people believe that our own government has some up there. But are these stories, they could be, a cloud of misinformation because people are noticing that there's some kind of space action going on. So just like the flight websites, there's some that keep track of satellites, and you can actually in real time notice that some of them go off course or don't do what they're supposed to do. So we have no idea what they're really doing. And I think it has to do with when they went to the moon, they realized that there was molten glass melted on the moon that could only happen from the sun burping. And I think that's what they were up there actually finding out. And I think that's what the big secret is that there's clear, substantial evidence that there was a technological civilization on Earth that got wiped out by plasma, and things changed rapidly and changed everything about the Earth, maybe even the way that it moves around. Because if you're familiar with Tiwanaku and Pumapunku, they're weirdly precise about the cutting and everything, but the actual temples are set at a degree that doesn't match today's cardinal direction. So it may be way older than they say it is, but that may be proof that actually that civilization was on a whole different orientation before things changed.
Well, then that would verify the rapid onset of a magnetic pole shift. But then that would also indicate a geophysical pole shift, where the actual crust of the planet moved. The only time that could possibly happen is if everything went to zero, where there was no magnetic field on the sun, there would be no magnetic field on the Earth. And then at some point, magnetic field on the sun kicks back in, which is forecast for 2046. That micronova is when all that plasma and energy would be expelled off the main core of the sun. At that point, everything flung off of that. I'm not talking about a core of different helium banging on itself to create electrons to come on up protons over here. Not that fusion, fission, fusion excuse that's given, but the ball itself enveloped in plasma that discharges because it's overcharged like a capacitor. 2046, that was Douglas Vogt's work, and he was predicting on cycles this same thing. But if we come a little bit nearer in, leading up to 2046, all the research I'd done up to this point with the Adapt 2030 channel was 2019 it started, 2020 food prices would be rising exponentially, 2021 it would be uncontrollable, or you wouldn't be able to hide it anymore. It'd be a well-known thing that there were problems with the food, energy, everything was changing into the extremes of the weather. Now we come into 2022, it's getting off the hook, like a year's worth of rain in 2 days in Australia, like landslides, all the land uplifts, basically crushing highways, railroad bridges, pipelines, all kind of crazy stuff cracking on the Earth's surface. And that was expected to amplify from this point forward, because we're really getting locked in the second magnetic field of those four gas giants that's going to culminate in 2024. we're getting into the field and intensifying every single day. I'm going to say May of this year is when we really get into it. You're going to look for some massive volcanic eruptions and massive earthquakes around May of this year, because that's when that first field is going to hook us in and, I mean, completely envelop. And the Earth doesn't come out of that until 2024. And then after that, as all the gas giants are on one side of the solar system, we're going to come out in front of the sun with nothing except those gas giants magnetically, with the sun all pulling everything into the Earth for 6 months in front of it. So we're going to be like the bug on the windshield, where all the magnetics were behind us, pulling everything into the windshield, smashing into the Earth. That'll be cometary bombardment, all kind of intense things that you're going to run for the caves during 2025. And Valentina Zarkova, there's a jump in time, and Valentina Zarkova, before she was censored and forced to retract her papers and call bogus on herself due to threats, had said in 2028, governments needed to start preparing for food shortages now, but that was back in like 2018. So she was saying there would be such a famine and such a shortage and such an inability to grow food on the planet that governments needed to start preparing 10 years out to store food to get people through the starvation of 2028. And after that, I don't know. And then we come to Douglas Votes 2046. So, I mean, the magnetic fields are going to start to stabilize after 2028. Like that magnetic field that'll affect this grand solar minimum is going to dissipate after that time. So each day, each year will get magnetically stronger. And I was predicting somewhere around 2031, 2033, everything would get back to sort of where we sit today in like 2033. The weather will start to stabilize again. Sort of where it's out of whack right now. That'll be out of whack coming back into sort of some synchronicity. 2033. So you got to look, how many years is that from now? Another 10 years. So we're going to go through this massive dip of food production losses on the planet. So that's my long-winded 2 cents there, Ransom. Take us out, man.
Well, I think we're in a fortunate place, at least in the Western world. I don't really know about Europe, but I know in the United States there are enough older people that remember how to can and do these other things. And if people everywhere started gardening, yes, some things aren't going to grow as well as others, but everybody will start discovering the foods that do grow. And in this way, you can kind of opt out of the system. But that is until at some point you're going to have to tell someone no, which I think now is the time. And that's what the public doesn't know, is that there's a race to get certain things established. And the kind of global government is well on par with what they expected to be doing by this time. So it's on the public to catch up and realize what's going on. Start growing, start prepping, start saving tools and things like that, because money may just disappear. It's happened before all over the world. There's no reason to think that it wouldn't happen here. And if you've kind of been following the whole story of America and the private Federal Reserve Bank, you would know that there's a massive bubble that's going to pop eventually. And why not have it pop conveniently when all of these other things are happening and going into the new phase of things? So I think the power's in your hands to, make it through the next decade. And what a cool experience if you did make it through the whole next decade on your own power and everything kept going along like it normally has and nothing went bad. There's still nothing bad that can happen from being prepared and self-sufficient.
Except getting more connected with the creator and source itself, the unified energy field of vibration and frequency of love and light that holds this third dimensional space together. And that vibration that triggers minerals to activate in the soil to grow plants. And to be surrounded by that air cleansing mechanism. That's what you'll get back to. Remember to go fishing in the pond, but check and make sure your water source is clean. Find the local pond so you can find out where you need to start fishing. Start fishing, it's a skill. Start fishing this spring. Gigging some frogs too. Anyway, thanks for watching. David Dubine, Ransom Godwin out. See you next week.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.
It's 11:59 at Radio Free America, and this is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.